Hey, what's up everybody, this is Muth24, and today I'm going to be taking a look at the Age of Ultron graphic novel. I had intended to show this off as part of my package delivery that I did recently, but it took a little while for this to get here, and the reason for that was because it was actually shipping from the UK, which I didn't realize when I ordered it, because I ordered this thing not that long after Christmas. But yeah, so it was coming from overseas, and the shipping wasn't really any different, it just took a lot longer because of that. But for those of you who maybe haven't heard, this is the storyline that they're going to base Avengers 2 off of. Now, they've said that the second Avengers film won't follow this exactly. They're going to borrow sort of elements that they like and incorporate that into their own version of the story. So it won't be exactly like this graphic novel is, but I can definitely see, which characters they could swap out for some of the ones they have in the Avengers film universe. Versus the ones that they have in the graphic novel here. Because obviously they can't really do Spider-Man and X-Men since those are owned by different studios in the film versions. But that said, this is the sort of like their big event, I think, for 2013 that they had. Because a couple of years before that was Secret Invasion, then Civil War, and then I think 2012's was Siege. I don't remember if that was their big thing, but it was one of their bigger things that they did a couple of years ago. But anyways, I want to say this was like their big event for 2013, because this is a relatively recent story, and actually it's surprising too, because this graphic novel, this compilation, is not that easy to find for real cheap. I was lucky to get the paperback version here for like less than $20. Most of the hardcover ones are like 40-ish, at least on Amazon. I don't know if finding them other places, but at any rate, I really like the cover art here. I think it's pretty cool. It's also surprising like how thick this graphic novel is. Like, it's at least 3 times the thickness of your standard trade back. You do have on the back a collection of all the individual issue covers there. I don't know how many like different volumes they had in the whole Age of Ultron story arc, but they do have 10, like the 10 main ones here, and then there's like one epilogue volume, if you will, at the end. And I feel like there were maybe certain volumes that they didn't include in this just because they weren't part of the main thing. They did the same sort of thing with Civil War, where there's like a bunch of spin-offs that weren't put in the final thing. And I'll get to that a bit in a minute, but it does feel like there's certain things that they left out. Nothing that's super important, but there's a couple parts where it's like, you feel like you could have expanded upon that point a little bit. But anyway, so like the whole plot of this story is that Ultron, who was created by Ant-Man, basically grows to an intelligence so great that he is able to construct all of these like sort of Sentinels, if you will, not like the Sentinels from X-Men, but like his own like drone versions of Ultron, and uses them to basically wipe out most of the human race. The ones that he doesn't kill, he keeps kind of under the power of, like, he keeps them oppressed by the power of fear, and most of the superheroes are dead too. There's only a handful of them left. And when we start the story off, we have sort of like these 3 teams of them. We have the main group, which involves Iron Man, Captain America, Hawkeye, Spider-Man, Luke Cage, She-Hulk, Quicksilver, Sue Storm, Wolverine, and a handful of other heroes. And then we have 2 other groups, which, like, one of them is just Moon Knight and Black Widow, and they are looking for sort of any leads that Nick Fury might have left behind, because they say that he has safe houses and all these bunkers all around the world for like all of his apocalypse scenarios, and they're trying to find out, what do we do in the event that Ultron becomes super intelligent and basically destroys everything. So they're basically just following his trail of breadcrumbs that he left behind, and of course they have no idea if Nick Fury's even alive at that point either. And then they have a 3rd team, which is Red Hulk, Taskmaster, and Black Panther. And that team doesn't get quite as much time to develop as the other ones, but it does sort of show just how things can go awry really fast, and how desperate times really call for desperate measures, considering that, Taskmaster is in the company of Red Hulk and Black Panther, considering that he's often a villain type character, or at the very least sort of a mercenary character. So that was really interesting. I thought that they picked the characters that they did. A lot of them, it's because they're super strong, like Luke Cage, She-Hulk, and Wolverine. They state like they're just super durable. And Wolverine obviously has a healing factor. And he mentions at one point that he's alright to go out and fight some of the Ultron Sentinels, and Tony Stark, is either Tony Stark or Steve Rogers that says, "No, you're not. Your leg hasn't fully healed." And he says, "Are you kidding me? Like 3 days ago, it was gone. At least I have a leg." So, kind of explains why the heroes that are there, and also sort of implies the power of the Ultron Sentinels themselves. And then the other characters who maybe aren't as like physically strong, like Moon Knight and Black Widow, they basically just sort of imply that they're just that resourceful, that they're that good at what they do. Hawkeye's kind of the same case, where he's just really good at what he does, that he manages to make it that far. So when we sort of get into the story, they're trying to devise a plan of how to fight back against Ultron's reign, and they sort of decide they're going to divide up into two big groups, divide the whole big group into two separate teams. That one team is going to try and infiltrate Ultron's headquarters by playing the role of traitor, and see what he has in store in his building, and maybe try and like either steal some intel or see if they can't do some damage to his headquarters. And the other team is going to try and escape the city while the main, hub ship thing there is distracted by the first team. Because the second team is intending to try and find another bunker of Nick Fury's, try and find something they can use against Ultron, because what they have right now isn't really much of a plan. We do see a little bit of the sort of change in personality that these characters have gone through over the time period that it's taken since Ultron took over the world. It's not really stated very clearly, at least in this collection, how long it's been since Ultron took over. They have a little flashback for Spider-Man when he says, like, I don't really remember much after everything started going down the toilet. Basically, when the story starts off, Spider-Man was kidnapped, and then Hawkeye saves him. So he's kind of in and out of consciousness there for a while, because he's kidnapped by these sort of like, I don't know, they're not really like a mob or anything, because there's nothing really to control at this point, but they're sort of like there's this gang of ruthless guys that kidnapped Spider-Man, but it's never really made clear like how long he's been out of it, how long it's been since Ultron took over the world. But it seems like it's been a while, because most of the superheroes are dead. Captain America doesn't know what to do for a little while there. Tony Stark shows some signs of maybe having lost his marbles a little bit at certain points. So it's not entirely clear how much time has passed there, but it does seem like it's been at least a little while since Ultron took over. Now, they do involve some elements of time travel and like alternate timelines into this, which is pretty interesting. That comes into play more during the second half, and the thing is, the first half of this story plays out very much like the whole post-apocalyptic scenario, and it's a lot darker. Not to say the whole story overall isn't kind of dark, but the first half is definitely darker, a lot more bloody, more violent in general, and then the second half sort of shifts gears to become a story about mainly Wolverine and Sue Storm. They kind of become the frontrunners for this story, and there's a reason for that, which I won't explain because I don't want to spoil the entire story for you, but it's kind of an interesting change in the way the story is told and the sort of the view that you get of the events that are unfolding. The one thing I will say, though, is that the title is a little misleading for this collection, because even though it's called Age of Ultron, Ultron himself, the main Ultron, does not appear until very late in the story. And that gets kind of back to what I was talking about, where it feels like there's some stuff maybe that was left out, or some stuff that's sort of missing from this collection. I know that there was an issue that I read, and I don't remember if it was like a digital version or just like some odd issue that I picked up at one point as part of like Free Comic Book Day or something, where it's stuff that happens at the beginning of this story that's not included in this version, where there's this sort of like group of super intelligent supervillains that recover this thing called the Space Knight, and the Space Knight is actually Ultron. They don't know it, or if they do know it, they obviously refer to him by like codename there, but the superhero team that's going to stop them doesn't know it's Ultron. And then when Ultron reawakens, that's when he starts moving towards his plan of, taking over the world and becoming super intelligent. They do gloss over that very briefly. Later on, they like kind of just do a quick play-by-play of that, but you never actually see that whole scene unfold. Not like it's super important to the story, but I know that was part of what they left out of this. There's also a little bit they talk about the alternate dimensions, or not alternate dimensions, sorry, alternate timelines, and different Marvel universes that come into play, and they just do like really quick snapshots of those. And I feel like they could have done a lot more there, which is a little unfortunate they didn't. But those are just a couple of the parts where I felt like there was more they could have done. I do think the story wraps up nicely enough. It's kind of interesting to have the epilogue focus entirely on Hank Pym Ant-Man, because he is absent for most of the story. Like, they talk about him. Obviously, he's important to the story because he created Ultron in the first place, but he's not involved in this main storyline other than in flashback. So to have the epilogue focus entirely on him and his process of creating Ultron in the first place, I thought was pretty cool, and served as sort of a nice little bookend to the story. So obviously the cover art here is pretty cool. The artwork throughout is really well done. It's, I mean, pretty typical of what you'd expect of Marvel stuff nowadays, but I'd say it's, on par with Civil War. If maybe not a little bit better in certain points, because you have this really colorful design for Ultron's sort of dystopia there, even though it is supposed to be sort of a dark drab environment. There's a lot of color going on there, which is pretty cool. The Ultron Sentinels look really nice, and then of course you have just a whole slew of different heroes there, and all their different designs look really cool. Even though they're nothing that we haven't seen before, I think just next to each other they all look really nice. They do make a few clever jokes and throwbacks to old stuff because, it being the end of the world, they only have so much they can work with in terms of their resources. So when they find some of their older tech, they're relying on stuff like the Mark II Iron Man suit, and there's like sort of just all these weird collections of things that are left behind. That's really all they have to work with. They also have in here some of the alternate cover art for the different volumes. See if I can flip to one of those pages real quick. Which I think some of the alternate art's honestly better than the main artwork. But these are the ones that I really like here, where Ultron is building himself. Mainly because we don't get to see that much of Ultron in the actual graphic novel itself. But yeah, when Ultron does show up, it's pretty cool. But again, most of the story is more about just the world he's created, the world he's sort of destroyed, and how the heroes are supposed to react in that sort of dystopia. But I really enjoyed this story. Even with the parts that I feel are missing or could have been expanded upon, I still think it's a really great story. I don't think I like it quite as much as Civil War, but it's pretty darn good as just sort of a standalone event series type thing. So I definitely recommend it if you can find it for a reasonable price. I know it's a little bit hard to track down, at least stateside on Amazon or something like that. I'm not as huge into comic books as some other people, so I don't know of websites that people tend to frequent for that sort of thing. So if you do know of sort of a website like that where you can find it easier, or if you have a comic book shop near you, because that'd probably be an easier way to get it. Either the trade back or the individual volumes. I really do recommend this series, and I'm really excited to see what they do with it for Avengers 2. But that pretty much wraps up this review, and with that, I will see you guys next time.